you have to really have communication, really understanding that it's not a competition, that it's working together. It's about collaborating, it's about working in a partnership. So it's really about realigning expectations and roles and make sure that both of them are on the same page.
Hola, hola, and welcome back to the Ambitious Women of Color podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Lynn Rojas. Today, we're talking about what happens to your relationship when you start to grow in your career. My guest is Cynthia Flores, a licensed marriage and family therapist and host of the Heal and Manifest podcast. We're talking about dating while ambitious, navigating partnerships when you're breaking traditional roles, and how to co-create a relationship that actually works for you, not what everyone else expects. If you ever felt like you had to choose between ambition and love, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Hello. Thank you, Cynthia, for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
I'm so excited to have you. Let's go ahead and start with the question I asked my guests. So, what is one thing you refuse to sacrifice for your career?
For me, I would say one thing is sleep. I don't think I would ever give up my sleep, and I'd have to set boundaries for that, but also I would say my creativity. That's something that I've had to really work through even when I started my career, I've had to
Hmm.
really like when I was in spaces where I felt like I had to make myself small, I felt like
Hmm.
I struggled to be authentic. And I realized, I can't really do that. I think that was maybe one of the reasons why that was actually one of the reasons why I started my private practice and my business. And I realized I want to be able to work for myself because I have a different approach. I have a different way of doing things. And I want to be able to express that. And I want to be able to do that my way on my own terms. So I would say that's one of the biggest things for me.
I love that. Yeah, because I mean, first of all, sleep is so important. It, helps you to be able to show up and think clearly. And I mean, I feel like it's underrated. That's one of the first things to go when people
Yeah.
are like, I'm in hustle mode. I can sleep when I'm dead. Right. But
Hmm.
you're not going to get as far and have the quality results if you're sleep deprived. And then
Yeah.
your creativity, it's an authenticity is so important to be able to like, you as a therapist be
Yeah.
able to run your practice, have that freedom of how you
Mhm.
want to run it, as simple as like your hours and how often you see, or like what resources you give your clients to just the approach and frameworks and things like that. So I think it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing that you discovered that and carved your own path so that you can stay authentic to yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I don't think I would ever be able to give up. I've had to learn the hard way, trust me.
So you're a therapist for those that are new to to your world, and you also host the Human Manifest podcast. You have your own private practice and your business. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you see. I know you help Latinas and women of color.
Yeah.
What are you seeing that are some patterns around relationship and ambition for these women?
So what I've seen in women and Latinas and women of color is this. They have come from humble beginnings, from families who have had to hustle, who are probably most likely immigrants. And so they've had to really grow up at a very young age. They had to become
Hmm.
very independent and be of support to their parents and their families. So when they actually get older, they start their career, they go into their career and they become very ambitious. They realize that they're also operating on survival mode. Either they have a scarcity mindset, which comes from, as I mentioned, a lot of them come from very humble beginnings. So they have to navigate money wounds. They have to navigate scarcity mindset, lack mindset. And then they go into their careers and then they struggle advocating for themselves. They struggle with people pleasing traits and tendencies. And they could be very successful in their career, but in their relationships, and I would say it's all interconnected, but in their relationships, sometimes they struggle. They've had to like hustle so hard that they get to a
Hmm.
point where they are at a very high level, place. and they're like, "Oh, shoot, like, where is my partner? Where's my husband? Where's where's my person?" And then they realize, "Okay, so now I have to find someone, or I want to, not that." Okay, so there's
Mhm.
the "I have to," and then there is that "I want to." The
Mhm.
"I have to," again, this comes from this scarcity, from these societal expectations of, by this age, I already have to have a career, I have to have a family, I have to have a partner or a husband or a wife, etc., whatever it is, and they have to have everything, their life all together, right? When we know that society, our culture has changed, many things have shifted, but these are some of the challenges that I do see. I would say one is they're either have a family and they're navigating like the balancing it all, or two, they're like either single and having to figure out where, how they can still be ambitious and find a person who is going to be either at their level, and they're going to be supportive, and then be able to balance that. So these are some of the things that I do see.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you were spot on describing me in some of those situations. So, like, I'm first gen, eldest daughter, like, grew up in the humble beginnings, like, immigrant parents, hyper independent from a really young age. It's like you grow up and they're like, oh, you're so mature for your age. And like you said, before it's like you just think I'm a mature person. That's a good thing, but a lot of it comes from that survival. It came from like I need to do that. And I remember as young as like, elementary school, me like working towards my education and career goals. And I'm like, why was I even worried about those things at that age? Right. But when you grow up in that environment, like you said, that scarcity, and I'm like, I am the one in control of my like trajectory. I'm the one in control of my life. If I don't want to live in these circumstances, then I
Mhm.
have to, change that for me. So for me, that meant like, my education and my career were my identity. And I was that
Mm.
person, like you said, that I was single for so many years because I was like focused on my education and my career. And I'm like, I can worry about that later. Right now, this is the most important. And I got to that point where I'm like, I'm not the right person right now to meet my person. I need to be successful and then I'm going to meet them. As if
Mm.
like that was I don't know, was gonna make me enough maybe, or
Right.
maybe then I can stop worrying so much about my career and I can focus on something else. So it's just so interesting that you said that because for me, for sure, I didn't date as much or like as seriously in my teens because I was so focused on my education and my career that I was like, later, once I'm successful, then I will meet the right
Mm.
person.
And you know what? I think that there's that mentality. Actually just did a post on that similarly around, for me in my 20s, it was a bit different. And everyone is going to have a very different
Hmm.
experience. But in my 20s, I was kind of like maybe seeking that validation and that reassurance in men. And I was trying to find my worth in men and boys. And, I was still going to school, I was studying, I was still following, what I thought I wanted, which I'm here now, but I went through different chapters and seasons of my life, and I realized that in my 20s, I think we can see both, right? We can see super ambitious, hyper independent, they just focus on one thing. And I'm a firm believer that it doesn't both of these things can coexist.
Hmm.
But what happens is that sometimes many women do also like self abandon or abandon
Hmm.
themselves, their dreams, their career, their lives for, maybe looking just for a partnership and for someone or to
Hmm.
be with someone. And I do want to say that there is no right or wrong. Don't get me wrong
Hmm.
here. You get to choose whatever feels right for you, but it's very nuanced, right? It's very nuanced because everyone's situation is going to be different. For me, it was that. For me, I realized that maybe I don't want to say that I wasted time. I think that taught me so much about
Hmm.
myself and where I am now and why I even do this work. But I realized, wow, I think that whatever I was going through in my 20s got me to where I'm at now. And that's okay. And I can accept that and I can move on and I can learn from that experience. But again, everyone's going to have it very differently. I think I didn't really find my groove and my purpose until like my 30s, and I was in higher education, doing my career, and I realized this is what I actually want to do. while I still like wanted to have a relationship and I was seeking that, but I didn't find it until like my mid 30s, and this is where I'm at now.
Same, same. I mean, but now you're happily married with a supportive
Yes.
husband. So,
Yeah,
it was like you said, all of it was meant to happen and made you the person you are to be the
absolutely.
right person for him. That's why I believe. Because even like um, I didn't find my partner until my mid-30s as well, and, like, we probably had a little bit different approach, but at the end, like, we found the people because we were the women that were ready for that relationship and ready to open up to that type of love and receive.
Absolutely. And I think that for many women that grew up maybe where they had to be hyper independent, they had to, follow maybe even family expectations or your own expectations and overachieve and overfunction. I think what happens is, of course, your identity shifts, right? Your
Mhm,
standards shift. So it is a lot of identity work. Your relationship dynamics also shift. Your partnerships also shift. Your relationship, friendships, your family dynamics shift. And it's important, why does it shift? I guess let me share that
mhm,
because there's a shift also in the either physical or emotional labor. Say you're in a relationship and you are, in your career, whether you have a business, whether you have a really good career for yourself, and even you have children, right? Let's think
mhm,
about that too. When that happens, I think that there is that, of course, that cultural and societal condition when it comes to gender roles and gender norms and
mhm,
following that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with traditional roles or any, I'm not saying that either. What I'm
mhm,
saying is that there is typically, though, in very traditional gender roles, that there's going to be a mental load and emotional, physical labor imbalance. And this is where, in your partnership, you have to really work through that. And that's one of the barriers and the challenges that I do think it comes up is that. How do you manage your business and your career while you're also managing being a mother, a wife, sister, a daughter, right? There's many roles that you have to play in that.
mhm,
So again, it's really figuring that out and also working through with, for instance, your partner or in your partnership through the discomfort of how do you have conversations knowing that maybe you may be the breadwinner in the family, maybe you may bring more income, maybe you're working more hours, right, than usual. How do you also compromise and manage that and work through figuring out work through setting certain boundaries so that way you also have quality time with your family, right? Because
yeah,
yes, being ambitious, having a career, having all of this is important, but for what? What is the purpose of that too, right? If it's financial security, financial stability, if it's to have more time with your family, are you even doing that too? Or is it even just taking way more time
mhm,
than you actually wanted? And of course, even in entrepreneurship or as you're starting something, it's gonna require you to hustle a little
mhm,
bit, right? And but it's really about communicating that as well. And I think that
yeah,
there's another part of that is when you like become successful on your own terms, right? Because I also just want to name that
mhm,
success is really based on how you define that, and it's very unique for everyone. But
mhm,
when you do become successful is how do you there's going to be situations where you are going to outgrow people, right? Whether it's family, whether it's friends, not because they're bad people or you're a bad person, it's just very common that you're
mhm.
growing and you're expanding.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to touch on something that you said around like when you, because it's something I see a lot, especially like with the clients that I work that, they're going towards the promotions and or building businesses and suddenly the relationship feels harder. Maybe like you said, that like change in dynamic or and then maybe because of the gender roles and oftentimes they could be the breadwinners or maybe their significant other either gets paid less or they lose their job and now they're like I'm growing and maybe it is more demanding for me and they're still trying to like do the things that they can do to control, like setting those boundaries. But then there's also like psychological shift that may be happening where like the
Mhm.
partner might feel either threatened or triggered, or like how do you navigate where it's like you are doing the things that you can control and like setting the boundaries at work, making time for your family. And I think a lot of it probably goes, like the communication with your partner, but like when your partner is now the one that maybe is changing or maybe reacting to your changes and reacting to like your success and your growth, and maybe in that time it does require you to have to put in more time to your career or your business.
Mhm.
Like how do you support like women navigating that where it's like they're doing the things that is in their control that they can do,
Mhm.
but now when you take into account like your partner, if you live with them, if you're married to them, or your family, like how do you navigate all that?
Well, specifically with the partner, if that is the case, which I've also seen is, you have to really have communication, and understand both really understanding that it's not a competition, that it's working together. It's not about competition, it's about collaborating, it's about working in a partnership. And I would say that having very solid goals, like couple goals,
Mhm.
family goals are so important because then they recognize that it's not either or, it's both,
Mhm.
right? It's both working towards a specific goal, whether buying a house, whether investing, and whether giving a better future for their families, etc. Like it's recognizing that they're not competing against each other. The other thing is recognizing that they have to really come up with certain agreements when it comes to responsibilities and roles. Because if that is the case, like even the emotional, the physical labor, the mental load, that's going to have to shift a little bit.
Mhm.
If she is the one who is working the most, maybe bringing the most money, something's got to have to be balanced. So it's
Mhm.
really about realigning expectations and roles and make sure that both of them are on the same page, because that's going to bring insecurity. I think that even for men are also raised from a very young age that they have to provide, they have to protect, they have to do all of these things, and that is also a conditioning that was instilled in them. And I think
Mhm.
that there's a lot of pressure for them to do that. And that can bring up a lot of insecurities, which we all have, right?
Mhm.
But it's how it's handled. If it's handled with criticism, with minimizing, with not even celebrating the wins, having that competitive mentality, that's just gonna that puts the relationship in a very uncomfortable situation, right? In a situation where it's not a partnership working together towards the same goal. So it's
Mhm.
recognizing that. So these are some of the things that I've really worked through. And of course, I think that there's situations where they might feel like emasculated or
Mhm.
whatnot. Those are things that they need to do, that requires them to look inward and to do the inner work. That's the thing. Not everyone is called to go to therapy, to do the inner work, to reflect, to introspect, to have a level of consciousness and awareness. Not everyone wants to do that. And that's unfortunate because we need more of that in this world, right? Especially now. But it's really important that the overachieving, hyper independent, or just like independent woman who knows what she wants, who is determined, who is goal oriented, wants a man, like yearns for a man who is going to be also a provider, who is going to be a
Mhm.
protector. Like, I don't want to work for the rest of my life. Yo quiero que me mantengan. I
Yeah.
tell my
Or like
husband,
have the option as that are like, I can work and I can make this money. But
eh,
if you go on maternity leave, or if like you want to spend that time with your kids, you want to know that your home is going to be taken care of.
absolutely, 100%. And these are conversations that I always have with my husband, and it's so important to have these conversations with your partner too. Like, yes, I can do this, but I don't have to do this all alone. I want you
Mhm.
to support too. I want you to do all of these things too. I don't want to just because I come from that conditioning. I want to also be soft. I want to also slow down. So how can we work together to have a life that feels good, not where we're gonna burn out, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I'd say is important to really have conversations with your partner.
And how can you like if you're in that situation where okay, you're setting the goals together and you are trying to be, mindful of like his conditioning and how can you like support like you said without criticizing, without blaming, how can you be like a supportive partner while also like voicing those needs. I don't want to say expectations, but yes, expectations like I want to have a partner that is going to be supportive, that is going to like be my equal that or is going to fill that role, not the roles that were created, but dynamics that works best for our current life right now, right? Because
Mhm.
like you said, if the woman's the breadwinner and things have to shift, like how do you have those conversations like in a healthy way so you are supportive, but also like you need those firm boundaries and expectations that you need to set so that the relationship can like grow together.
I would say I think one of the things that women struggle with, and especially ambitious women that are hustling and doing their thing, struggle with is asking for what they need. And most importantly, knowing what they need.
Hmm.
Sometimes a lot of these needs they meet themselves because they come automatically because nobody was able to meet those. They had to work twice as hard to work to where they are. They've had to not ask for help and do things alone because maybe they felt like that was either a sign of weakness or they feared that people were going to reject,
Mm.
right? I think that there's maybe that fear of rejection of asking for help. So I would say what is really important in this is to co create a modern partnership. Right. And being able to come up with, have these conversations, one with your partner of how would they want things to look? How would they want their relationship to look? Because it's going to look different based on what they grew up with, right? Maybe they grew up with very traditional gender roles, gender norms, belief systems. So that's going to have to shift around a little bit. But I would say that figuring out together what's co-creating a modern partnership where yeah, if there's certain things that they think that like say certain traditional roles that fit with them, that's fine. Like what's going to work for them, that's
Mm.
what's important. It doesn't matter what social media is saying. It doesn't matter what your parents are saying. What matters is what's going to work for both of you. And that's very very important because again, we get caught up in, well, this is how I grew up. This is what I saw in my mom doing. This is what it's like
Yeah. Like it doesn't have
is
to be the way that you saw or like
it
it has to be
doesn't.
what works for your relationship.
Exactly, and don't recycle unhealthy family dynamics or roles that you don't wanna carry on with your relationship and with your life. Like, it's okay to leave those there. It's okay to take what works, and it's okay to also leave what doesn't. So, that's gonna be really important. Another thing is really knowing what you want, knowing what you need, and being able to ask for them. Because again, many think like I can do it alone. I've been able to do things alone and there can be some discomfort with asking, but it's going to be really important that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do everything alone. Like why are you in a partnership if you have to do everything alone?
Yeah. No, I
So
love
that's one
that.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And now thinking about, okay, so we're talking about like, those in relationships and maybe there's like a shift in dynamic because of the growth, but then there's also the women. And, like I was saying, I honestly like felt this way too, is that the more successful you become, you feel like maybe you're too successful or you're too ambitious. And then you worry, maybe I'm going to be alone because I'm an intimidating man. When I was growing in my career, I felt that way when I would date. I was like, maybe I'm just intimidating men. I mean, I think part of me, I had my own healing journey I needed to
Mhm.
do, but I did feel that like oh, maybe now that I waited to be more successful in my career to like take dating seriously, now I was feeling like, okay, maybe they're intimidated by me or maybe I'm too ambitious. So maybe I will be alone or something like that. So then, some women might like dim their like or not want to share so much about what they do. I mean, I even had a friend that was like, "You don't need to talk about all your accomplishments on your first date," or things like that, you know? So it's like that balance. It's like you're proud of what you accomplish, but then also like being able to be yourself and
Mhm.
be secure that there is somebody out there that is
Mhm.
going to love and appreciate and be proud of what you've accomplished. And how do you like help women to be able to like have that shift?
I work with a lot of self-worth, right? Because these messages come from patriarchal conditioning that says, like, if you are too, like, you're too much, like, you're too successful, you're too cold, you're too smart, you're too intimidating, right? I think that the patriarchal messaging says, like, if you're too ambitious or career oriented, then it's too intimidating. Men don't want you. When that is true, some men don't want that, and that's okay. You're not here so other men will want you. You're here
Hmm.
to find a partnership and someone who's gonna work with you and who's gonna like and love all of you, right? And I think for me is really helping other women work through their self-worth, recognizing that their self-worth, their value is not dependent on what society tells you, what culture says to you, what men or, the patriarchal system tells you. It's about what you intrinsically who you are as a person, as a human being, right? With all of the qualities, all of your strengths, your values, that is what makes you. And reminding yourself that there are people out there that want
Hmm.
that match with that, and that's what's really important. It's reminding yourself that.
Yeah, I mean, when I met my boyfriend, actually, that was like on our first date. He was like, "Oh, that's a non negotiable for me." Like, a woman that is career oriented, that is, ambitious, that has
Mhm.
her life together, that is independent
Mhm.
because, you know, he's Persian. So in his culture, like, maybe it's more like the man's the provider, the woman is like taking care of the home. But he didn't see
Mhm.
that in his home. I mean, both his parents were very active and their careers and
Mhm.
everything. So there are men like that,
Mhm.
are going to love having somebody that is ambitious and career
Mhm.
oriented and knows what they want. And versus, maybe there are men that want
Mhm.
somebody that's just going to take care of them in the home. And, there's a person for everyone, right?
There is a person for everyone, and like I said, I think that you have to figure out what works for you because for me, I think that I'm a mix of, like, modern and traditional because I grew up very traditionally, like, Mexican household. My mom would do everything, and I appreciated both of my parents did. I think they all had a role, which is fine, and that worked for them. But I know now that there's certain things that don't work in my marriage and that I get to choose what works and what doesn't with my husband. And we both get to decide that, right? And that's what's really important is that there's just so much talk, even online, that I see, right? I think like even the modern dating world,
Hmm.
what I see a lot in the modern dating world is that younger women are looking like generation millennials are more like, "I gotta hustle because no one's gonna give me money, I have to figure it out." That's us, right? But also recognizing that we are allowed to shift that too. We get to choose how we wanna live. Yeah, the Gen Z, the younger generation, they're going more towards traditional roles, which is very interesting, and we're seeing the dating dynamics that are happening now and what I'm seeing a lot is content around like wanting more to be more trad wives and then to be provided to and like them not having a career, etc. and just do that. I don't I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but there's a lot of messaging out there that puts many women in a risky, vulnerable place and very dangerous place. Because the reality is that our parents' generation, what happened was that they were not really allowed, like our mothers, grandmothers, etc. They didn't leave relationships because they wanted to be there, or they actually, yeah, they stayed because
For the
That's
kids, for
for the
the
kids,
family, what they're
for the
gonna say.
family.
Yeah.
But not only that, financially, they didn't have the means to do that. So some were trapped to stay in very abusive relationship dynamics. And that's unfortunate because that's true. That's what happened to many. And now you get to choose. You get to have your career, you get to have your money, your bag, you get to have your career, be solid in life and still choose a partnership. And so it's not either or, which was before. It
Mhm.
now it's and you can have all of these things and you can have whatever you want, but don't just depend. The most like dangerous advice is to depend on a man. I would
Yeah.
say that's just not something I recommend.
Yeah, and why do you think there's this shift in Gen Zs and this approach of like wife? Because I know that in politics alone, just looking
Hmm.
at voting and people maybe turning more conservative views, right? And a lot of it is like that younger population because like you said, if we're just speaking of children of immigrants, so like the millennial population, I mean maybe the what is Gen Y or the
Yeah.
the ones before us, the
Hmm.
generation before us, maybe the generation between us and our parents. Like if we're thinking about like our parents' generation and how they didn't have the options and opportunities or stayed in those marriages or those situations because of needs. And then I think of millennials as cycle breakers. I feel like a lot of us, because we have more options and because we saw what our parents went through, we wanted something different. And
Hmm.
and that's why like I feel like I'm really proud of our generation. We have really broken a lot of cycles. So
Hmm.
then to see like the generation after us, and not that, they're not breaking cycles, but maybe they didn't have to go through the things that we
Hmm.
did. So I'm just like curious of like why they're shifting to that more like traditional conservative views versus like trying to improve on what we're working on.
Well, I think you brought a big point. I think that every generation shifts and changes, right? And if you think about our parents' generations versus us, we have more resources, more
Mhm.
um yeah, internal and external resources available. So that was a big shift and change where we recognize, well, we can start breaking these cycles and patterns that we
Mhm.
no longer serve us. Yeah, it did serve my parents in a way to help them survive. But then even now, younger generations, I do think that there is a social, like political aspect that plays a big role. And I think we're seeing it even even as like different presidents come in and cultural shifts and societal shifts, that's gonna all play and social media, which I think holds a lot of power
Mhm.
in the younger generations. And I do think it's a combination of many of these different factors. It's not just one.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint one, but I
Mhm.
do think that all of these things that I just mentioned have a lot to do with where younger generations are going and like
Mhm.
wanting to be more traditional. Yeah, I think that's the best response that I can give you.
No, and that's okay. I
I
mean,
can go into different tangents and I mean, I can think about feminism and like the revolution of like all of these things and where we are now. I think that all of these extremes can be quite dangerous. Like
Mhm.
I know that this is probably a hot take but even the red pill movement, and I don't know if you know much about red pill, but do you know much about it?
Not too much, yeah.
So, I mean, red pill movement, it's really kind of like a movement of men who are online as well, who are also instilling these very traditional gender patriarchal values in younger men. And a lot
Mhm.
of young men fall into it. And there's different branches to that. But from that extreme to like extreme
Mhm.
feminism, like because it's like left, right, it's black, white, it's very, very black and white way of thinking that
Mhm.
it just distorts people's reality. and also how they relate to others, how they view the world, how they view themselves, and how they go out in the world and build relationships and connections, which is
Mhm.
why we're also seeing a loneliness epidemic. And we're not only seeing that in men, we're seeing that in women too.
Like,
Okay.
where they
Like,
purposely, like, they're like, "I just don't even wanna date."
I don't want to date because I don't want to do the inner work, and women are have super high standards. And the reality is it's not even about standards. It's because I think that, again, the extreme black and white thinking, it's either this or nothing.
Mhm.
Like, relationships don't work like that. I'm sorry. Like, you got to be able to compromise. You have to be able to work on your shit. You have to be able to do the inner work. You have to be able to have self awareness. You have to be able to, talk things out again, and compromising and coming up with agreements. Relationships are not black and white. And I think that I am seeing a lot of dating advice and these shifts happen that are very divisive
Yeah.
out there, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so, like, what do you recommend for women that, they're ambitious and career oriented and their partner doesn't understand or support them? Like, what, like, practical advice would you give them?
Like, if their partner doesn't want to support them.
Yeah, maybe their partner isn't supportive, or
Mhm.
maybe they are unhappy about, like, how much time they're spending on work, or
Mhm.
that just are not like supportive partners of like their growth and their
Yeah.
goals.
I would encourage them to do an assessment, like to do an inner assessment where you actually reflect and introspect. Is your partner actually saying this because it's true? Of course, you are growing and expanding, and your work and your career and your business, it's going to ask you to do that. Like,
Mhm.
it goes literally hand in hand in your with your healing journey. It's not even separate, to be honest. But are they really genuinely like want quality time, want you to set boundaries with work so that way you also dedicate time to the home, to family? Or is it because they're genuinely not supporting you, they're criticizing, they're minimizing, they're like seeing you as a competition? So there is a difference, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's something that you need to also think, because sometimes you may get defensive and be like, "Oh, well, he's not being supportive because, well, maybe he's just really wanting more time,
And he's
you
not
know,
voicing like his needs.
and he's not voicing his needs, or he is, and then you're taking it like the wrong way." So
Mhm.
one is really assessing where is this coming from, and you also assessing like, how does this impact me? How does what he's asking impacting me? Is he really being supportive in many, maybe in different ways, like acts of service, right? Like, is he cooking and cleaning while I have this meeting, right? Or is like, again, just your experience and your relationship is going to be unique to you. So I would say assess that. And if your partner is genuinely not supportive and you're
Mhm.
noticing that there's a huge imbalance of where you are to where he is at, you have to also assess. And sometimes we think that we have to carry and we have to take everyone with us to in every season of our lives and every chapter. And I know that personally, I was in my past relationship, I was finishing up my career, and then I think that at that time, we were in a very different place in our lives. And not because I felt like I was a lot or,
Mhm.
better than him. It's just I think that that brought a lot of insecurities in him, and he couldn't work through that internally. So there was a lot of anger and resentment towards me. And I was like, I can't really do this. I can't, because one, you're not willing to look into yourself. You're not willing to
Mhm.
do the inner work. And I'm not going to be carrying the emotional labor into having to cater to your needs. So
Yeah.
that's something that you need to assess. Is your partner actually intentionally working together again to working up to reassessing expectations, to shifting roles and dynamics in your partnership, coming up with agreements, coming up with goals, plans, etc. And if not, then you also have to decide, because again, sometimes we don't get to bring everyone with us. And that's the truth. And I know that's really hard to say,
Mhm.
but I know that I have personally experienced it. I've seen it, and you have to think about yourself. I know
Yeah.
that may sound selfish.
But there are times to be selfish, and
There are
and
times to
not
be
selfish
selfish.
that
Yeah.
you don't care, but like you said before, it's about self-worth and respecting
Mhm.
yourself. And if if you're giving too much and it is coming at a cost of your happiness, mental health, physical health, that's like a situation like the same, or I mean, maybe not exactly the same thing, but like when you're in a toxic workplace, when you're in a
Mhm.
toxic relationship, you have to really evaluate like, is this worth everything it's costing me? And like,
100%, yeah.
and if you're staying there, what is that saying about me and my worth and what I value?
Yeah. And I know that's where it's important that you also do the inner work. You go to therapy, you get someone who is going to help you to work through that and to understand yourself and see where you need more clarity
Yeah.
and how to also do like some kind of plan, either an
Yeah.
exit plan or whatnot, because when you are stuck in a very toxic, also dysfunctional relationship while you're trying to grow, that sucks. I've been there. That was my last relationship. And I realized, I stayed in that denial phase. I stayed
Mhm.
in that grief. I was already doing the grief prior to leaving though, but still, which it happens it's very common. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of denial. There's like, I can make it work and I can fix him. I can fix this. And you can't. You can't change
Yeah.
anyone. You can't fix anyone. You can't save anyone. You can only do that for yourself.
That was great
Yeah.
said. So I want to move really quickly to rapid fire questions before we end the episode. Just, give some quick responses for people that are like still trying to get some answers. So like, what would you say is the biggest red flag in a partner for an ambitious woman?
I would say minimizing your wins, criticizing, and lack of initiative.
What about green flags? Like, what are some green flags that they're supporting your growth?
Accountability, effort in changing and in doing and improving the relationship dynamic, etc.
And how do you know when you should work on the relationship versus when you should leave?
Well,
That's a heavy one.
yeah. I'm like, when you should work on the relationship when their words match their actions and their actions match their words. And when they
Yeah.
should leave is when that doesn't match. When that doesn't match.
One communication tool every woman should use.
I would say I needs-based communication and I statements. I think that's very important because it can be very hard to ask for what you need or ask for help. So yeah.
Perfect. All right. So, what is one thing that you want listeners to take away from today about navigating relationships and being ambitious? Something that will help them to stop choosing between ambition and relationships.
I wanted them to know that to don't dim their light, don't shrink for anybody, that the right person will be supportive and support their dreams and work together to work towards their dreams. And that's what I would want them to take.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Cynthia. I feel like all of this is much needed. I feel like for me, it, helped me understand this kind of dynamic and situation better. And, I'm even taking some of these things for my own relationship. And
Mm.
thank you for bringing your therapeutic lens. And how can people find you and work with you? Let us know.
So I have my podcast, the Heal and Manifest podcast, which is in your favorite platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And I'm also on Instagram and TikTok at Cynthia Flores, LMFT. You can find me there, engage with me and my content. Send me a message. And I also have my website, www.cynthiagflores.com. You can actually look at the work that I do, set a consultation to work with me. I provide individual, couples, and family therapy, and I'd be happy to support you in your healing journey.
Yay. Well, thank you so much
Thank
again.
you.
And I'm so excited for this episode to air and for everyone to be able to really assess their relationship dynamics and take some of the tools that you shared and ways that they can improve their situation or reevaluate if they should even be there. So thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
I hope you got exactly what you needed from this episode and that at least one thing clicked. One shift, one conversation, one thing you could actually try this week. And if you're listening and thinking, okay, but how do I apply this to my situation? That's where I come in. I work one-on-one with ambitious women of color who want to grow in their career, get promoted, negotiate more money, or make the next move without burning themselves out or losing their peace. We get clear on the strategy, work through what's really getting in the way, and build the success that actually fits your life. If this episode resonated and you want support, you can find me at jessicalynn-wellness.com or DM me on Instagram at jessicalynn-wellness. We'll chat about how I can help you thrive in your career and in your whole life. And if you know another ambitious woman of color who needs the conversation, share this episode with her. If you loved this episode or the podcast, leaving a quick rating or review helps more women find this space, and I appreciate it more than you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. You don't have to choose between the career and the life. You get to have both, and we're building that together. I'll see you next week. Vámonos.